Greetings. My name is Kate Rademacher, and we're here with Writing for Your Life and Compassionate Christianity. I'm really thankful for many reasons to be here with the Reverend Kate Meyer. Kate is the author of a new book, Navigating the Waves of Grief, Healing Prompts and Reflections to Move You Forward. And I was telling her before we started recording that I've been reading her book, and it's really helpful, and it's beautifully written, and it's very practical and helpful. And we're going to talk more about that, I know. But just to say thank you, Kate, for being here and for your words and for your ministry. I'm looking forward to hearing more about sort of how this book came to, how sort of what the impetus for it was and how it's come to fruition. But before we talk about that, maybe we can just start by if you can just tell us a little bit about your background, where you're based, and sort of what your sort of ministry looks like. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Kate. Glad to be here. I will always consider myself a Wisconsin girl at heart, though I live in Michigan now. Um, I live here in Michigan with my husband and Chocolate Lab, who rules everything. His name is Duke, the dog, not the husband. Um, and I am a hospice bereavement counselor and spiritual caregiver. I kind of stumbled into hospice work and then fell in love with it, and then had the opportunity to work kind of trial bereavement counseling. And that was my soul spot. So, going just a really quick backwards glance here. I went to college thinking youth ministry just because I don't know what else, right? I didn't know what else I wanted to do. But like 2 years into college, I thought, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. And then I had this thought of, I think I'm supposed to go to seminary. I really don't want to go to seminary because I don't want to pastor a church. So I don't know. So I went very reluctantly, kind of kicking and screaming. And like I kept trying to make these deals with God. Like, okay, I'll go, but can I get out of the Midwest? No, no, you can't. You just stay right there. In fact, like you can't even leave Michigan. You have to stay. So my college and my seminary, they're not even a street apart. They share a sidewalk in Holland, Michigan. So, um, and then I was out of school for about a year and went back and got a counseling degree. So I added a counseling license, licensed professional counselor in the state of Michigan. And, throughout that kind of wondered, what is this all going to look like? And that's when I had the opportunity to merge the chaplaincy and counseling into bereavement counseling. And I call it my soul spot. It's just this place where everything came together. And that's so rare, right? Where we can um, go, oh, that's why. That's why I had to do that. And it came together. So, and then I wrote, excuse me, then I wrote Faith Doesn't Erase Grief, which preceded Navigating the Ways of Grief. Um, I, I kind of call that one my passive book. Faith Doesn't Erase Grief is the book that talks about exactly what it sounds like. The fact that believers have to go through the grief process. We can't ignore it. We can't pray it away. We can't just say, well, they're in heaven and so I'm fine. Uh, and it's written for grievers and helpers alike. So it's a tool as much for pastors and elders and well meaning congregants as it is for grievers to help through that process. And then navigating the ways of grief, as I imagine you found as you're going through it, is the active book. It's the one where uh, you really do the work because grief is not something that you can just passively experience. We really do have to, there is actual grief work that we have to do. And so um, that's kind of where navigating the waves of grief came from. I'm also a fiction author, and so I have two novels out, and uh, a third is kind of in its very, very, very early stages of creation.
That's great. Well, that's really cool. And I saw that you had other books, um, and I didn't realize they were novels. I hadn't had a chance to check them out. So that's really, I really admire people who can be in multiple lanes, in terms of writing. So I think that's really fun. Well, let's talk about navigating the waves of grief. And as you just said, it's a, it's an active book. I would even call it like maybe part workbook. I don't know if you're using that language. Um, but maybe you can just sort of start by telling us about sort of the structure and how it's organized.
Yeah. Um, I have it themed into four different parts. Emotions, because you can't do grief without them. Identity, because you can't get through grief without your identity being changed. Connection, because all of our connections are impacted, connection to self, connection to others, connection to God or the divine, uh, or nature or earth or whatever that is for you. And then this concept that I call through, which is an idea of the other side, right? And I can go into really what I mean by that, but so it's laid out into those four themes, and then within those themes we have reflections, which are brief written reflections, quotes, where I just kind of dive deeper into um, a sentence or two from either Faith Doesn't Erase Grief and or a scripture. And then at the end of each reflection, there's an action challenge, where I ask the reader to do something, either immediate. Some of them are, set a reminder in your calendar and come back to this in a week. Um, Mark this page and check back in a couple months and see how you are in comparison. And some have next level challenges, which are like, I'm feeling really strong. I'm going to do even a little bit more. Um, and then there are toolkits, which are uh, the more, I would say, creative expressions. And I hesitate to say that because I can feel the anxiety that that brings for people. So let's be clear. I'm not an artist, no way, shape, or form. Um, I, yeah, not at all. Even stick figures don't really look like much of anything when I draw them. So in the book, when I talk about drawing, you can draw, you can write, you can tape things in from a magazine, you can print things from the internet and tape them in, glue them in. It doesn't matter, right? It's what connects with your brain and what you're trying to get out. So please don't let the idea of needing to quote unquote draw something. But the flip side is true also, right? I very intentionally, my publisher and I talked a lot about the word journal, um, and whether or not to use it. Uh, and I try really hard to, how do we avoid as many barriers as possible? And I think journal can be a barrier for some. Um, and so I talk a lot about that, I think, in the introduction. So you're not going to be asked to write all of the time either. Make it work for you, right? It's your work. It's your grief work. This is a place to start the process for you, and then you make it yours and make it personal to whatever it is your grief experience is.
Well, thank you for that. And I think I wasn't sure how much to say about my own journey, but maybe if I can just say one thing because I think it'll inform our conversation. So, I recently started seminary, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, and we moved here for that, to Tennessee. and I started seeing a new therapist. And within, I'd say 32 minutes, sorry, my cat has decided to join us. Within less than a lot of time, she was like, "It sounds like you have a lot of grief work to do." And it wasn't obvious to me at the time. So I really appreciate sort of your framework and yeah, just the structure that you provide. And so this is a transition to my next question, which is in one of your, I can't remember where, but at some point you said, you might have said it multiple times, you have to make time, like intentional time for grief,
Mhm.
for grieving and for grief work. And I was like, that is, and that's also juxtaposed with like you say, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that grief is also unpredictable and it comes when you don't expect it. So it's this sort of dual nature of you it comes when you don't expect it and you have to make time for it. So does that resonate with you, and do you think that sort of aligns with what you're trying to say in the book?
Yeah, so I talk about grief being both and, not either or. So yes, it comes when you least expect it, and sometimes it feels very out of control and you couldn't stop it even if you wanted to. And then there are times when you have to be very intentional about it because it it does change. It does lessen in frequency, intensity, duration. And so you have to get more intentional about it because we can kind of lull ourselves into this false security that, oh, I'm all done. And then if we do that, if we let ourselves think that we're kind of done, which is a falsehood, by the way. We don't finish grief. Um, then we get lost. We get bombarded. Something explodes at some point within us. So intentional grief time is for the people who are really good at avoiding it. Then, and I talk about positive avoiders in the book. There are some specific reflections and toolkits for positive avoiders in navigating the ways of grief. And positive avoiders, you know who you are. You are the ones who buy all the books, listen to all the podcasts, watch all the movies, and those are all good things. But there's that next step, right? And navigating the ways of grief is the next step where you do. Um, but then there's also the people who are so in it that push so hard that they don't stop to let themselves rest. Grief is a whole being experience, and your body needs to rest. Your brain needs to rest. Your heart needs to rest. So, allowing yourself distraction time and rest time um, is also important. So it truly is an experience that is full of the both and. It can feel very contradictory, right? To tell people you have to have intentional grief time and have distraction time. So,
Yeah, I worked as a hospital chaplain this summer, just for maybe 12 weeks. And that was one of the things I learned, that you can take a break also from grieving. It's not
mm,
um, wrong to do that.
no.
Yeah. And I thank you for the plug of rest. I know we're just getting to know each other, but my last book is called Reclaiming Rest, and it's about Sabbath keeping. So and other kinds of rest. So I appreciate what you're saying a lot. Um, so maybe we can talk about the section on identity, because again, something I really struggled with is not wanting. I think you're right. I think it's a very insightful comment, what you said, which is grieving changes you and your identity after you grieve and after you have had loss and after you've grieved that loss, you will be changed. But I don't want my identity to change. So I feel like that's also part of the grieving. Like I'm changing and I don't want to change, or I didn't want to change. I don't know if
Yep.
that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. And that's such a central part of grief is that this out of control piece of it, right? So much of it is just all of this is happening to me. So how do I take that back? And the identity work well, I would say all of the aspects, the identity, emotions, connection, and through all of that is about taking that control back and saying, no grief, I'm going to control you. I'm going to learn to say how how much this wave impacts me and for how long and to what degree. Um, but so there's some very core scientific stuff that happens. There's some great work out there. Mary Frances O'Connor, The Grieving Brain, fantastic. Read it. Um, it's just so good. Very sciencey, but also very accessible. She did a great job. Um, that talks about what is actually happening in the brain when we grieve. So I mean, like your brain is literally changing. So that's happening. Um, but also, if you think about identity as how you see yourself in view of other people, in view of, what is my role in relationship to this other person, how they see me, how they helped me become who I am now. And it's the wrestling with, okay, so if they're not here physically, and you might get annoyed with that by the end of the book, because I say that a lot. Physical presence is the only part of them that's gone. But with the absence of their physical presence, what what truly is gone from my identity, but what maybe has just changed? Do I maybe just care about something different? Right? So, um, and maybe has a new part of my identity been revealed versus have I lost something? So I think sometimes we get very overwhelmed by this thought of I'm a different person now because it has such a negative connotation, when in fact sometimes we end up coming into this different part of ourselves that we didn't even know was waiting for us, but somehow feels truer in a sense. Um, and a piece of that is is recognizing that though there are parts of us that change, right? And this is why, um, we there are friends that we have from kindergarten on, and then there are friends that I don't know, they're so seasonal that it's so brief, right? Um, People that come in and out of life for a season. And the reason those friendships don't last as long is because you both change. You're just different people. Your identity shifts. That's all it is, right? And I say that just to make it a little less scary that our identity changes. It's a little less intimidating that way. Um, but what never changes, what can't change, is who you are at your core, the core of who we are. And so, you know, presuming most listeners are Christian, what does that mean for us, right? And I really don't like to use that word because it's so complex right now. The word Christian, right? It's a very complex word right now. Um, but to have that identity, that is untouchable, I don't know, loved and yeah, loved and seen and whole, that can't be taken away, right? So remembering that too, that we have this foundation that's untouchable, no matter how the rest of our identity shifts throughout.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. It's timely. Um, Shifting gears, when you first um, were describing the layout, the sort of format, you were talking about drawing. And you were very quick to say, like, you don't have to be, I'm not an artist, you don't have to be an artist. But I just want to really affirm in my own journey the surprising role of art. And I don't mean like art, I mean like drawing and painting and I felt sort of embarrassed about it actually until and your book helped me um be a little less embarrassed and sort of the way you're talking about it. So I just wonder if you could say a little bit more about what the role of visual of like not just words, is it sort of, and again, maybe this relates to brain science, and sorry if, and my apologies if you've talked about this in your book and I'm forgetting, um, that maybe that's more of a somatic experience to be drawing than to just be, doing narrative explanation. So anyway,
Yeah, I think, I mean, is there some sciencey answer? Sure, absolutely there is. It's not mine. But it's it's really because there are just times where we can't. Like some stuff is just too much for words, or there we don't have words, right? It's either it's too jumbled, too complicated. There are way too many threads to try and pull apart to understand, or it's just beyond what human language can begin to comprehend. Um, but color resonates, and um, somehow shapes seem to still resonate. Um, it's why, consistently, grievers will say to me, I cannot fathom going back to church right now because the thought of hearing the music is more than I can handle, right? Because that's the soul that we feel that so deeply that we know that you can't like that gets at us at a different level. And coloring, not I mean, yeah, maybe coloring, but using art expression in some way um, kind of hits at that in a similar way. We process it differently, we visualize it differently, because inevitably, just by its nature, art doesn't have to be described, right? That's the beauty of it. You just put it out there and it's left to interpretation. And I don't have to tell you what I meant by it. You don't have to tell me what you meant by it. It's just there and it's meaningful to me, and that's what matters. Um, so there is a lot to it, and I think if you can get out of your own way, and try it and just let yourself experience it, um, and try is a whole concept in the book, right? Just try. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work for you. That's fine. But at least then you know you've attempted it. So,
yeah, I think
um,
that,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's just such a complicated experience that really, taps the whole body. So why not throw everything at it and see what works for you, right? I mean, there are people for whom tears really attack 90% of grief, but not many, not many people really get through it just with tears. Most of us need a lot more than that. And especially for people who aren't criers, they you gotta you gotta dig deep and find other outlets for emotions that, criers would normally have natural outlet for. So why not try?
That's really interesting. And I'll just offer a personal anecdote, which is today in class, I was in church music. Interestingly, your point about music, I think, is really interesting because I'm taking a church music class. I was doodling and I have one of those digital notepads, to take notes instead of like a paper notebook. And so I started doing art because I was like listening. Yeah, I was listening, but I was a little bit daydreaming. And I started like doing some doodles about grief because I knew we were going to talk and I was reading your book and so it doesn't have to be, that's the other thing. It doesn't have to be like, oil paints or acrylic paints or, markers and you can just doodle and it's
Yeah.
still like I was, you know, it was like conceptual, but also visual, as you're saying. So it was, anyway, I don't know. I think that resonates with your book because the format of your book is also very simple, right? It's not inviting
Yeah.
you to, you could also do that, right? You could go make collages and, you know, but you don't have to, I
Right.
think is one thing I took from your book. Like you can still do some art, but it doesn't have to be multimedia or something.
Right. Right. You make it how detailed or
Right.
simple as you want, right? And you also, this is not a book that you sit down. Well, you can. Let me rephrase that. This is not a book where you must go from beginning to end, which is not easy for me. I'm a person who, if I pick up a book that I'm excited to read and realize this is not the first book in the series, I have to put it down and say, sorry, I must now find book one because I want to get to this book, which is unfortunately book three. So now I have to go find all the other ones. Um, but there are four themes. There's a mix of reflections and toolkits throughout the whole thing. Um, if you open it one day and the page you land on doesn't feel right, then go to another one and just keep doing that until you find one. Um, and pacing, right? Do you do it every day? Do you go once a week? I don't know. What does your grief need, right? Um, yeah. And maybe it varies. In early grief, you're doing a little bit more. And as you go along, you don't need it as much.
And I think that that gets to another theme, which, or sort of question I've had, which is like, how long, Lord? And how long does grief take? And can you give me like a timeline? Um, So maybe sort of that's a question, but also tied to that, and you can take either or both of these. You know, can you just talk a little bit more about your section on called Through? Because when your publisher first reached out to me and I read just the one pager about the book, you know, the concept of through didn't immediately wasn't totally clear to me just by like the word. So can you just sort of describe kind of what that section's all about?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, I years ago, I'm an audiobook person. I've had jobs where I drive a lot, and so I just audiobooks. Was listening to a book where they were reading Psalm 23 for who knows what reason. Um, and the actor emphasized the word through, even though I walked through, I don't know what version it was, but the version I read now, even though I walked through the darkest valley. And the way they emphasized the word through, it was like I was hearing that word for the first time. And it was this moment of, okay, so there is going to be dark valley. Like that is a certainty. It's going to happen. I will not be alone in that dark valley. And there's a through. Through says to me there is another side. It does not guarantee that I'm coming through unchanged. It does not guarantee that I'm coming through unscathed. It does not guarantee that I'm getting to the other side without some kind of permanent impact, but it does guarantee that I am not living forever in the darkest valley, right? There's a different place where I'm dwelling forever. And so grief, especially in the very beginning, absolutely feels like this is where this is it. This is how I'm going to feel forever. I cannot envision um, not feeling this way ever again. And especially, I experience that intensity the most when I work with clients who are working through spousal/partner loss or child loss, right? Of any, I mean, from like, um, yeah, any age. Um, anyway, um, I just distracted myself through that because I want to be clear what I'm talking about there. So I'll just be clear about that. I'm talking about um, miscarriages and stillbirths and right the whole range. Um, it's hard to fathom ever getting out of that depth of darkness. And so through is that pinprick of hope, that pinprick of light that says, I can't see it yet. So I'm just going to trust that somehow I'm going to get from here to there. And along the way, that pinprick's going to get a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. And that's, I think, what we have to hold on to is that grief it is not a sprint. It is not a massive mile marker situation, right? I mean, it is incremental. It is, and it is forward and back. It is, um, the light's bright. Oh, it's a little dim again today. We're kind of back and forth, and so through is about how do you find your way closer and closer to the point where you can live fully in the present, dream about and plan for the future, enjoy memories of the past, even when there's still obviously flickers of pain, but you can still enjoy going back there, but you don't need to live there because you know that they've not truly gone, right? Like you can access the person when you need to. Um, when uh, where you are ready to re-engage in life fully because you know that your purpose, maybe new, maybe reshaped, um, is still there, and you're ready to kind of pick that back up and say, okay, I might not like it, I might not be ready for it, I might kind of hate that I have to do it, but I also know I have to, so I'm going to. Um, that's what through is. So it's about working towards that place.
Well, thank you. Well, I have, I think, two more questions, but if there's other things you want to cover that we haven't talked about, please jump in. The next one's a little bit of a twist, since a lot of our listeners are identify as spiritual writers or faith-based writers or are aspiring faith-based writers. I'd love to just sort of hear how this writing process was and this publication process was vis-a-vis your other publication, sort of do you have any advice or insights, or kind of aha moments from publishing this book, or just any advice in general to folks who are interested in publishing their work. So the question is kind of surprises or new insights about writing and publication and or just general. Some people just want to give general advice about writing,
Yeah.
which is great as well.
So I'm doing this conversation here on my primary laptop. Um, I say primary because I have a bunch of work stuff. But my actual personal laptop has a sticker right here that says trust the process, and I put it there to remind myself to do just that. Um, and so I call myself a deconstructing pastor because that's where I'm at right now. I'm very much in like we won't get into all that right now, but anyway, um, so trusting the process is hard for me right now. And to invite the spirit into the writing and believing and trusting that what what is laid heavy on me is is that way because it needs to get out there. That that's the encouragement for me. And so what I have found about my process is I can think about something, but until I sit down and it starts to really just kind of fly out, like it's not ready until then. It because that's what I have found is that if I am trying to make something happen, if I'm trying to write and nothing is coming out, it's not time, and it's probably because I'm trying to make it happen and it's not what's supposed to be happening. Um, which is really weird language for me to use because it kind of rubs against everything I'm like tearing down in my own belief system right now. So it's very, I don't know, it's a weird thing. But also when it lines up, when it's like, oh, this is like the experience of bereavement counseling, or when I finally, it took David, my publisher, and I a long time for me to land on the layout of navigating the waves of grief. Um, I had a lot of different ideas in my head, and none of them worked. None of them. I could not, and they were perfect in my head, right? And then I would sit down and try, and the problem was I was trying to fit something unique into a pre-existing box. Um, because I do believe there's unique things about this work and specifically the blending of psychology and faith um, in this way. And when I finally said, yeah, let's try a new model, a new system, break the mold a little bit, then it came, right? And the same thing happened with my novels, by the way. I self-published those because they're too they're too spiritual for secular publishers. They are they are not Christian enough for Christian publishers, right? And but not until I let go of that, of trying to fit either of those molds, did they work. Because you tell the story you have to tell, right? Whatever you are trying to write, just be true to that. The rest will work itself out. If you're true to what you are meant to be writing, the rest will come. Just don't try to fit somebody else's mold. Don't let people twist that for you.
Thank you so much. What a great answer. Um, well, my last question is for a friend. Um,
We'll call them.
I have a friend who was curious about this one. So it's really, I mean, I'm being tongue in cheek, but I'm serious, which is sort of giving yourself permission to grieve. So in
Mhm.
my own, you in a minute ago, you mentioned people who'd lost a spouse or lost a child, including miscarriage and stillbirth. And I'm really grateful that you mentioned all of those groups. And that I have I part of my grieving as the Writing for Your Life community knows is that my husband was recently diagnosed with Parkinson's. So it's like anticipatory grief. And,
Mhm.
so it's not that I don't think I have the right to grieve, but it's more complicated or sort of it feels more obscure to me somehow than if the other one of the other things I'm grieving is the empty nest. Like my daughter just went to college and I just feel like it's so cliche and I shouldn't have to grieve this or something, or it's not as important as other kinds of grief, but like it's undeniable. So yeah, so I guess I'm answering my own question, but what about those people who feel like they don't deserve to grieve or they're not it's their grief isn't big enough or something or do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do.
I'm asking you for a friend though. No, just kidding.
Yeah. uh, grief is grief. So whether it's human death, whether it's um, anticipation of, whether it's disease, whether it's retirement, whether it's divorce, whether it's moving, whether it's graduation, whether it's right. I mean, it grief results from change. I also this kind of flows into this a little bit. Grief also happens in relationships that weren't good, weren't healthy, weren't right. I feel like I hear that. I hear people either shutting down someone's grief or questioning someone's grief, like you didn't even have a good relationship. Why are you grieving them? Well, don't say that. Don't ever say that to somebody. That's so judgy. Um, but we grieve because there's been a loss. Something has changed. And in some sense, there's a part of us that says, it's never going to be what it was, right? And that's not always bad. Children are meant to move out of the house, right? Um, I there is a reason that kids move out and then should not come back for extended amounts of time because it's just a different dynamic all of a sudden. That doesn't mean it's not painful. It doesn't mean it's not hard. It doesn't mean it's not an adjustment. Um, so, my oldest nephew just turned 20 and uh, for the very first time in his life had his birthday away from family. Now, did he process that? I don't know. He probably didn't care, but I was hyper aware of it and I hated it for him. Like, oh, that's terrible. It's really, and all of those things, right? It, and can we just name like there's grief everywhere right now? It is everywhere right now. And all of that is grief. It is all genuine grief right now.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Well, Kate, I'm so glad we had a chance to talk. I'm really grateful. This is, as I said, timely for me. So I'm that's part of why, the book project, when David reached out to me, really piqued my interest, but also it's a beautiful piece of work. And
Thank
the
you.
conversation that we've had is so meaningful to me, and I'm sure it will be to our listeners. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your wisdom. I'd also like to give out, since we've been talking about David Morris, just to give a shout out to David Morris and Lake Drive Books, because
Yeah.
he's who connected us and is such a fabulous person and collaborator writing for your life, and does such amazing work through Lake Drive Books. So I'm grateful to you both and to the team there. So maybe just as a final question, you can tell us where we can learn more about you and your work, where we can find you online. And again, just maybe I'm assuming your book is available everywhere books are sold.
Yep.
But if there's anywhere in particular that we should be looking for your book, that would be great. Yeah, just any final words you have. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Website is Kate J. Meyer, Meyer.com. And that you can kind of get anywhere from there. It has descriptions of all the books, and if you're in West Michigan, it tells you where you can buy the books locally. Um, if you happen to be in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, there's a bookstore in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where you can buy the books locally, which is kind of fun. Yeah, and they're on, if you like supporting local, they're on bookshop.org if you want. If you don't need, whatever. They're anywhere. Wherever you want to buy them, you can buy them. If you want them at your library, you should ask your library and they can get them for you, by the way. Yes, totally support that, 100%. This one, Navigating the Waves of Grief, does not have an audiobook because it's not audiobook friendly. Faith Doesn't Erase Grief does have an audiobook. Throw that out there. So, and I am on um, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.
That's very cool that you're on TikTok. That's good.
I mean,
It
little by
makes you
little,
cool.
little
Well,
by
thank you
little.
so much. Again, a huge thanks to the Reverend Kate Meyer, Navigating the Waves of Grief, Healing Prompts and Reflections to Move You Forward. A really fabulous resource full of wisdom and practical action activities and reflections and art and different things you can try and engage with. So I really recommend this book, and really was such a fun time talking to you, Kate. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate. I appreciate it. Had a good time. Glad it happened.
Yes, thank you. All right, blessings, and keep us posted on how the launch goes.
Yeah. Will do. Thank you.